Do you see it? There.
Fucking thing's hunting us.
So, here we are. This is my full review of Alien Romulus for those who both disliked the movie and those who loved it. All are welcome here, of course, and having read the comments from my initial thoughts video, I can fully understand every critique, and I think it's wonderful how we all vary in our views. There were some issues for myself, but I had a very enjoyable experience overall. So let's jump right in under the assumption that you all know and understand the Alien franchise and have seen this film because there will be spoilers. So the way I see it is, the first half of the film was considerably better than the second, but the latter part was essentially the reason why we came in the first place, and it was good enough for me. This is not a slight on the film or director really, as I enjoyed the whole shebang, despite a few minor flaws to do with pacing and resurrected dialogue lines. Speaking of resurrection, we'll get to that in a bit. But if I take a step back and look at the movie as a whole, it feels like a nicely gift-wrapped horror package with some amazing practical shots that would even make fans of The Thing take notice. But if we remember Aliens, for instance, that was a lot more compartmentalised in storytelling and delivery. What I mean is, in the 1986 Aliens, you could truly feel the distinctions between each act of the film. The scenes from Gateway Station to on board the Sulaco were just as riveting as the rest of the picture, but felt like a separate entity in comparison to the rescue mission chapter or Ripley's encounter with the Queen. This made it more difficult to define Aliens as just one thing, but rather, what it did was conjure up a multitude of emotions and warm memories looking back. Romulus, however, is more in keeping with 1979's Alien in that it presents a slow build-up of character development, unease and anticipation during the first half, but unlike Alien, it then without any real transition suddenly hits you with the action and scares one might attribute to the rest of the movies in the franchise. And it does pay homage to all of those films and the isolation game in many ways. In hindsight, I wonder if one of the film's issues was that it doesn't allow many of the scenes to breathe, as pacing at this point switches gears to full throttle and remains there until the credits roll. I guess it's better to accept that every Alien film is a different filmmaker's interpretation of storytelling and genre definition. Therefore, Romulus once again is a different kind of fish, and one that thankfully slid through the waves of skepticism I had stored up before going in, mostly. I have to say, the way the film opens gave me goosebumps. I almost thought for a second that we were seeing the Narcissus, Ripley's lifeboat floating through space, and one of my theories was correct. That wasn't the case, but I loved the quiet eeriness of the Wayland vessel drifting through the wreckage as it tracked Big Chap's cryptobiosis cocoon. I got that part right. We saw it being tracked on the monitor feed, so does that mean the grappling hook used by Ripley had a tracking device installed after all? How else did they track it? Let me know in the comments if I missed something there. And you know what? I love those short clips of the Weyland-Yutani scientists reviving the original Alien, and then later on in the film falling victim to their own research and hubris. I suggest we start a petition to have this premise as our next Alien film. Not like Alien Resurrection, please no, but more in the vein of the sinister shots we are privy to in Romulus. I loved how dark and foreshadowing these glimpses into secretive company activities were presented. I also enjoyed the brutal depiction of frontline company life at Jackson Star, on what I believe is still an anonymous planet in an unknown star system, unless I wasn't paying attention and we were told. But this is where one of the movie's biggest strengths starts to take hold, and I speak of the relationship between the android and the rest of the crew. In fact, David Johnson was phenomenal as Andy, the outdated synthetic, and his ability to make us feel for him in situations that had him been used as a disposable tool was very effective for me. I just wish we had another 10 minutes on the colony to explore more of the architecture and to develop an even stronger bond with the crew, as I really got immersed in this part very much. It also did wonders to help establish the lawlessness of off-world locations, and how unethically driven Weyland-Yutani are in their quest for dominance and control. The early cinematography and activity on the surface reminded me much of the Terminator, when we saw hunter-killers hovering low and large tank tracks in motion. It seemed like Cameron's influence is all over the canvas between the machinery and scenery here, which fits so perfectly. Once we got to the derelict station, I started to sense that ticking time clock and a feeling of dread creeping up on me. Equally impressive were the smaller details in the design of the station and how the salvagers were forced to navigate their way inside. The tight crawl spaces through maintenance access panels and shafts were the perfectly foreboding imagery we needed to spark our imaginations for what was to come. I also appreciated the very technical and time-consuming docking mechanisms needed for the small utility vessel to unload crew members as well as retrieve the cryosleep pods. The manoeuvres were beautifully analogue, which matched the retro-future aesthetics that were fully on show in almost every shot. Lots of flicky switches and dated-looking monitors were the perfect accompaniment to this film. The sound effects of the station coming alive with the loud reverberating clunks and groans really gave the station a sense of size and scale. This was used to great effect by elevating tension when they needed to stay silent around the xenomorphs, but ultimately were forced to activate power to open doors or switch on lights. These moments had me leaning back in my chair in anxiety because I knew whatever was on board probably just heard it too. Essentially, the reasoning behind this heist mission was to steal cryopods and enough fuel for them to bypass a 9-year journey to a place called Uvaga 3. To complicate the matter, the crew soon find out that the station is on an activated collision course with the planet's ice ring, after some very recent events involving the former crew, and therefore their reliance on Andy's innate ability to communicate with Mother becomes not only a contentious issue for some of the group, but one that works great as a suspense-loaded plot device, especially once they find a partially destroyed synthetic by the name of Rook. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure why they didn't present Ian Holmes' likeliness with practical effects as well. The deepfake was very off on the close-ups, which had me wincing a few times, I must admit. I wonder if they couldn't have made a prosthetic mask, as the android was damaged anyway, so it wouldn't have needed to be perfect, you know? Still, we have his sympathies once more, but this time on a much broader spectrum. There is a lot to talk about in this film, so I'll try to keep to most of the noteworthy topics and scenes. After the initial facehugger outbreak that takes place in the water-filled lab, everything spirals out of control for the crew from this point onwards. Like with every careless group of youngsters doing things they shouldn't, the inevitable happens and somebody gets impregnated. Despite many of the other criticisms others have expressed, one of the decisions made that I struggle to get my head around is simply the accelerated growth rate, which I believe is faster than any other Alien film to date. I understand why a 2-hour film where only the second half gives us some alien action needed things to happen fast if we were to see the outcome of the outbreak. But the only way I can rationalise these occurrences is if I believe it had something to do with the non-Newtonian fluid containing the destructive pathogen which Rook had extracted from the xenomorph when creating the facehuggers, aka Ridley Scott's black goo, and ultimately his response to James Cameron's conception of a queen. Otherwise, the embryo inside Navarro's chest achieving full adulthood in a matter of minutes just doesn't make sense outside of plot convenience. Sticking with the divine gift to humanity, or Z01 as it is now named, this story theme that made its debut in Prometheus now looks like it's going to be sticking around. If you are a fan of this idea, then at least they somewhat explain the substance and the company's intentions a little further in Romulus. My thoughts are that wherever the ovomorph, or egg, comes from, be it a queen or other means, it doesn't matter too much as long as they tell this narrative well enough going forward without destroying existing canon. I don't dislike the idea of the black goo either, as its complex properties only reflect the perfection of the creature itself, and add a plausible explanation to the origin and evolution. Not to mention the fact that of course this still could create a queen within the species if needed. That being said, I don't believe Ridley Scott's prequels did enough to adequately explain it for many fans to jump on board. Regardless of how many films they add, this whole story ends one way for me, and that has everything to do with the original space jockey discovered in Alien. Who was this intelligent and advanced species carrying eggs on board their ship, and did they have a part to play in the xenomorph's evolution or even creation? And yes, I know this was partially answered in Prometheus with the reveal of engineers, but I'm sorry, that was never fleshed out or followed through enough for me to take it too seriously. For now, I think I'll keep stored away in my imagination the first reaction I had as a kid to seeing that lightning in a bottle moment when the crew of the Nostromo first discovered this giant being, fossilised into the chair on board the derelict. Never has any moment in film had me so lost in wonder and intrigue. But sorry for going off on a tangent, what else do we have? We got phase plasma pulse rifles, electronic sticks, and well, that's about it in terms of weapons this time around. I noticed how they incorporated both of the auto-targeting capabilities of the smart gun and the compactness of the pulse rifle in this earlier model used by Rain, which was a nice touch. It had a mixture of both firing noises as well, but much meatier than the Colonial Marines M41A, with some of that iconic sound effect dampened down slightly. There was quite an emphasis on the consequences of acid blood, which was another positive, and how it would truly affect a space station and the reality of decompression if one of these things were to be killed. The potency of their blood can never be overstated, so it was great to see the effects of this all over the station, as well as it being responsible for the death of the character Bjorn. And on that note, instead of acid only being released when fired upon, I do prefer to see these creatures using it as part of their arsenal, like when we see the cocoon spitting out drops to protect itself. This ability also helps to explain how Kane in the original Alien film had the facehugger burn its way through his helmet. One of my favourite parts of the film was probably observing a major part of the creature's life cycle that is normally reserved for off-camera. The cocoon sequence after Bjorn jams God knows how many volts of electricity into the cocoon's opening was thrilling to say the least, even if we knew what was going to happen thanks to the trailer. I think this is where Fede Alvarez was able to shine the most, as there were a few decent scenes that involved the creature, as well as the inability of the crew to escape their claustrophobic surroundings. Then, with nowhere for them to go, like when Kay was trapped in the shuttle with the newly formed alien, it allowed for some horrifically tense slow shots of the alien exiting its sap and unfolding itself in preparation for its first victim. It was a great decision to do this, as we're not usually so privy to what the creature does in its personal moments. However, this is also where I have some conflicting thoughts. In the scene I just mentioned, there is an explanation as to why the creature could take its time. But then, why a bit later on in the film did a massive bunch of Xenos hesitate as Rain was powering up her rifle, which resulted in the elimination of about 10 of them all at once, as they seemingly just lined themselves up for what could have been an honourable death. I feel like the latter parts lost some of that predator and prey momentum that helped maintain some of the constant tension. It did, however, provide a great death-defying anti-gravity scene as Rain tries to navigate past the deadly floaters while attempting to keep the station's hull intact. I wasn't massively impressed with the elevator scene either, when Andy suddenly turns into Captain America and pounces on the Xeno that was trying to capture Rain, for the facehugger experience. I didn't hate anything about these latter parts, but I do wonder how much control Fede had over these elements, as he does so many things expertly well, but then a couple of silly stuff happens just for convenience, it would seem. I think it's fair to say that Ridley, as a producer on Romulus, certainly had a few of his wishes installed on the film. In fact, we know now from a recent interview that bringing Ash back as Rook was Ridley's idea. So, let's talk about the ending. It's hard to articulate why, but it did work for me, and I was very creeped out by the execution of how this thing stalked the last survivors, and much of it had to do with the lighting and special effects applied to everything that was happening as we see the shuttle edging ever closer to the ice ring. If this scene was part of another film, I think most people would say it was a frightening moment, and was effectively well shot. Therefore, I think what will divide people once again has more to do with the extracted pathogen and should or shouldn't it exist. I would never tell another Alien fan what to think, but if the alien is a perfect specimen, then if analysed in the lab, I can understand and accept the discovery of such a powerful substance. That's just me. It was revealed in the film that Weyland believed this formula could enable humanity to bypass evolution, cure us of all ailments, and allow greater expansion for our species within the galaxy. My only worry with this is whether we will end up with an advanced human affected by the pathogen that is more deadly than a xenomorph, similar to what we had a glimpse of in Romulus as well as Alien Resurrection. I hope not. Remember 2018's The Predator, when humans were gifted with the Predator suit that was more powerful than anything they possessed apparently? Yeah, no thanks. So perhaps, in theory, all this meddling could diminish H.R. Giger's xenomorph even further, which would be a sad day. In any case, I'll throw a link in the description showing the actor who played the humanoid monstrosity at the end of the film, as I love anything practical and it's always fascinating to learn who plays these disturbing creatures. Overall, I was very happy with the film and found it to be a thrilling cinema experience. I did notice some flaws and possible outside interference, but it never ruined my experience. But damn am I glad to have an exciting Alien film once again in 2024. I feel like I needed this film if only for my mental health, as I've been missing this universe far too much and I needed my Alien fix. So great casting, especially from David Johnson with his dual personalities and motives. That was interesting to watch. Amazing effects and lighting, superb sound design and music score. The cinematography was beautiful and the aliens themselves were a delight to watch. I thought the film might be more gory, but it demonstrated enough threat and violence that we actually didn't need any more gratuitous body horror than was shown. I'd highly recommend Alien Romulus to any fan of the franchise, but would always welcome and expect divisive thoughts with this one. So thanks for listening to me ramble in my little unorthodox review. Let me know your spoiler thoughts in the comments, and as always, I'll try to reply to you all. In the meantime, you all know the drill folks, stay entertained.